Have you ever stood between two mirrors and seen an infinity of yourself stretching into the darkness and wondered which one was real? Have you ever felt your own heart to be a battlefield, a place where two irreconcilable truths wage an eternal war? On one side, the cold, clear, and unblinking eye of reason, a voice that demands evidence, that measures the stars and finds them silent, that weighs the world and finds it wanting. On the other, a fire in the chest, a delirious and ecstatic certainty that whispers of a hidden love, a secret music to which the entire universe is dancing, a truth that can only be felt, never proven. If you have ever felt the pull of the magnificent, lonely truth of the questioner, the one who stands defiant before a silent cosmos, signal your allegiance to the tavern of the real by liking this video. It is a quiet raising of a cup to a truth that needs no faith. And if your soul has ever yearned to dissolve in the fire of a love that consumes all doubt, to join the eternal dance of the lover who sees the face of the beloved in every atom, then subscribe to this channel. You are joining a caravan that travels not by map, but by the magnetic pull of the heart. This is the story of such a war fought not with swords and shields, but with poems and philosophies, with a cup of wine and a prayer of ecstatic surrender. It is a battle for the soul of Persia, a battle that rages within the heart of humanity itself. We are about to step into the center of this sacred conflict, to witness the collision of two titans who walked the same earth, breathed the same air, yet inhabited universes that were worlds apart. One built a fortress of reason against the indifference of the cosmos. The other threw open the doors of his heart and invited that same cosmos in for a dance. One is the master of the eternal question, the other, the keeper of the eternal answer. One will teach you how to live bravely in a world without a God. The other, how to die ecstatically into a world that is nothing but God. Forget what you think you know about faith and doubt. We are journeying to a place where doubt is a form of worship and faith is a kind of madness. A place where the path to wisdom leads either to a tavern at the edge of the universe or to a dance at the very center of existence. Two doors stand before you. Two voices are calling your name. The question is not which one is right, but which one you have the courage to follow. The world of the first Titan, the grand questioner, is a world of impeccable and terrifying logic. It is a universe seen through the lens of a mathematician, an astronomer. He stands under the vast silent canopy of night and does not see the watchful eyes of angels or the glittering throne room of a benevolent deity. He sees a clock, a grand, impossibly complex, and utterly impersonal celestial machine that measures out the seconds, the years, the millennia with a rhythm that has nothing to do with human affairs. His days are spent in the observatory, mapping the movements of the stars, predicting their eclipses, refining the calendar to an almost perfect measure of the solar year. And his nights are spent with the existential vertigo that comes from this knowledge. The stars are not a comforting presence. They are a constant, chilling reminder of his own insignificance. They are the ultimate expression of an indifferent universe. He hurls his questions at this silent, crystalline sphere, questions of justice, of purpose, of meaning. And the only answer is the silent, predictable turning of the constellations. This silence is not an absence of God for him. It is a property of the divine mystery itself. He cannot reconcile the passionate, interventionist, and judgmental God of the holy books with the cold, silent, mathematical precision of the heavens he measures with his own hands and eyes. The God of the preachers is a character in a human drama. The God of the cosmos is the drama itself, silent, vast, and incomprehensible. This leads him to a profound and deeply unsettling conclusion. If the heavens will not provide the answers, then we must find them ourselves here on this fragile spinning earth. If the cosmos is indifferent, then it is our sacred duty to create our own meaning, to kindle our own warmth against the cosmic cold. Our lives, like the brief flicker of a firefly against the eternal night, are all the more precious for their brevity. The stars, in their silent majesty, are his ultimate spiritual guides. They teach him humility in the face of the infinite. They teach him the incalculable value of the finite. And they teach him that the most profound act of worship is not to bow in submission to an imagined deity, but to stand tall, look up, and have the courage to embrace the beautiful, terrifying, and silent truth of our fleeting existence in a universe that did not ask for us and will not miss us when we are gone. Into this same world, a second soul is born, a man who looks at the universe and sees not a machine, but a lover. He is the titan of the heart, the ecstatic dancer who perceives a different kind of truth. For him, the universe is not silent. It is singing a song of unimaginable beauty, a song of love and longing. The rustling of leaves, the crashing of waves, the turning of the stars, these are not the random motions of an impersonal machine. They are the gestures of the beloved, a secret language of love that can only be deciphered by the heart. He does not need an observatory to understand the cosmos. His laboratory is his own soul. He believes that the human heart is a mirror, and when it is polished clean of the dust of ego and fear, it reflects the true nature of reality, and that reality is love. He sees the divine not as a distant creator, a potter who fashions the clay and then leaves it to its fate, but as an immanent, all-pervading presence. God is not in the heavens, God is the heavens. God is the very fabric of existence, the dance of creation and dissolution that is happening in every moment. To find God, one does not look up, one looks in. The journey is not an intellectual one, it is an emotional, experiential one. It is the path of annihilation, the dissolving of the small, separate self into the vast ocean of divine love. While the astronomer-poet stands alone, a solitary observer contemplating a silent universe, this poet invites us to join a dance. He spins, not to create a spectacle, but to lose himself. The whirling is a physical manifestation of a spiritual reality. It is a way of untethering the soul from the static, rigid world of the ego and allowing it to be caught up in the great, dynamic, spinning energy of the cosmos itself. In the dizziness of the dance, the boundaries between the self and the world dissolve. The dancer and the dance become one. The lover and the beloved merge. Loneliness becomes an impossibility, for how can one be lonely when one is everything? This is a truth that cannot be proven by mathematics or logic. It is a truth that must be tasted, experienced, lived. It is the drunken, delirious, and unshakable certainty of a heart that has fallen in love with existence itself and sees in every sunrise, in every face, in every heartbreak, the secret smile of its eternal, ever-present beloved. At the center of this battle of worldviews stand a single, potent symbol, wine. But for these two titans, this liquid sacrament represents two profoundly different paths to truth. For the astronomer-poet, the realist, wine is the source of a forbidden gospel, a chalice for a different kind of communion. In the rigid world he inhabited, wine was the emblem of sin, the path to damnation. But he saw that the fear of wine was not about the liquid itself, but about what it represented, the uncontrolled, unapologetic, and ecstatic embrace of the present moment. It was a sacrament of the now. To drink the wine was to make a conscious choice to dissolve the anxieties of the past and the fears of the future into the warm, flowing reality of the immediate. The preacher sold salvation on credit, a paradise to be enjoyed only after a lifetime of penance. He, the pragmatist, the mathematician, preferred cash. He saw that this life, this very breath, was the only currency he could be certain of, and he refused to devalue it in the hope of a posthumous reward. The wine he speaks of is a profound metaphor for direct, unmediated experience. It is the intoxication that comes from looking into the eyes of a lover, from solving a complex mathematical problem, from watching a rose unfurl at dawn. His tavern is the sanctuary for the honest soul, a place where the heavy armor of piety can be removed and the naked truth of our fleeting existence can be confronted without fear. To drink his wine is to have the courage to face the universe as it is, not as we wish it to be, and to find joy not in the promise of eternity, but in the exquisite, heartbreaking beauty of a single, unrepeatable moment. For the mystic, the lover, wine is also a sacrament, but its purpose is not to sharpen the senses to the reality of this world, but to dissolve them into the reality of another. The wine he speaks of is the intoxicating love of the divine. It is not a symbol of seizing the day, but of annihilating the self. To drink this wine is to become drunk on God, to lose the sober, rational, and limited consciousness of the ego, and to merge with the boundless, ecstatic consciousness of the beloved. For him, the tavern is the entire universe, and the cupbearer is God himself. The intoxication he seeks is not a temporary escape, but a permanent transformation. It is the death of the small self, the I, that is so concerned with its own fears, desires, and ambitions. In this divine inebriation, the rules and regulations of orthodox religion become irrelevant. The distinction between the saint and the sinner, the mosque and the tavern, disappears. There is only the lover and the beloved, the drinker and the wine, and the two are one. This is a dangerous, radical, and liberating spirituality. It is a path that bypasses the intellect entirely and aims directly for the heart. The goal is not to understand God, but to become God. The wine is the catalyst for this mystical alchemy, the divine potion that transforms the lead of the human ego into the gold of divine consciousness. So, while one poet drinks to remember that he is a man, finite and mortal, and must therefore cherish the now, the other poet drinks to forget that he is a man, and to remember that he is, in his essence, divine, eternal, and inseparable from the love that moves the sun and the other stars. The battlefield of these two worldviews is littered with the great questions of existence, and nowhere is the conflict more stark than in their view of the Creator. The astronomer-poet, the questioner, stands before the cosmos as a prosecutor in a celestial court, and his primary piece of evidence is the flawed nature of creation itself. He employs a powerful and disturbing metaphor, the potter and the clay. In the conventional telling, we are the passive clay, and a wise, all-powerful potter shapes us according to a divine plan. Our imperfections are our own fault. But the poet shatters this familiar story. He looks at the suffering, the injustice, the sheer randomness of human existence, and he does not see the work of a perfect craftsman. He sees a world filled with flawed vessels, pots that are misshapen, cracked, and destined to break. And he dares to ask the ultimate blasphemous question: if the pot is flawed, who is to blame, the potter or the clay? He poses it with a lawyer's logic. If the potter is all-knowing, he knew how the pot would turn out before he began. If he is all-powerful, he could have made it perfect. Why then does he create a vessel he knows will be weak, fill it with the wine of life and desire, and then punish it for spilling a few drops? This is his eternal lawsuit against the cosmos, a case he pleads on behalf of all humanity. His is not a denial of God, but a demand for a God who makes sense, a God who is consistent with the evidence of his senses. He finds only a silent, indifferent, and perhaps even incompetent potter who set the great wheel of existence in motion and then walked away, leaving us, the flawed pots, to grapple with the cracks in our own being. This is the cold comfort of the realist. We are on our own. For the mystic, the lover, the creator is not a distant, questionable craftsman. He is the beloved, present in every atom of creation, and his actions are not to be questioned by the limited logic of the human mind. He turns the problem of evil on its head. The suffering, the injustice, the flaws in the clay are not evidence of God's absence or incompetence. They are expressions of his mysterious love. He tells the story of a king who owned a beautiful and priceless falcon. To test its loyalty, the king would sometimes hide his face, ignore its calls, and even strike it. The falcon, if it was truly loyal, would not question the king's actions, but would understand them as a mysterious expression of the king's love, a test to deepen their bond. So it is with us and God. The hardships of life, the pain, the suffering, these are not punishments. They are divine messengers, love letters from the beloved written in a secret ink. They are designed to crack open the hard shell of the ego, to break our attachment to this world, and to create in us a deep and desperate longing for our true home. For the mystic, to question God's design is the ultimate act of arrogance. It is the clay trying to understand the mind of the potter. The only proper response is surrender, trust, and a radical acceptance of everything that happens as a direct, personal, and loving communication from the divine. Where the questioner sees a flawed pot and a negligent potter, the lover sees a perfect masterpiece and a loving artist whose methods are beyond our comprehension. One demands a God who is rational, the other demands a soul that is willing to become irrational in the face of a love that transcends all reason. The problem of suffering is perhaps the sharpest point of divergence between these two Persian titans. For the astronomer-poet, the existence of pain is the ultimate refutation of a benevolent, all-powerful creator. His poetry is filled with a profound empathy for the broken shards of humanity. He looks at the virtuous who suffer and the wicked who prosper, and he cannot reconcile this with the promise of a just universe. The scales are broken. The judge is either absent or unjust. His response is not a theological one, but a deeply humanistic one. In the face of this cosmic injustice, our only recourse is compassion for one another. We are all flawed vessels, cracked and leaking, doing our best with the shape we were given. His philosophy leads to a profound sense of shared fate. We must be kind to each other because the universe is not kind to us. The tavern, his symbolic sanctuary, is a place where these broken vessels can gather, not to be judged, but to be accepted. The shared cup of wine is a sacrament of mutual consolation, a fragile but beautiful shelter against the cold winds of an indifferent reality. He does not try to explain away suffering, he confronts it, he names it, and he finds the only possible solace in the warmth of human companionship. This is a philosophy for a world without a safety net, a world where the only meaning is the meaning we create through our love and kindness to our fellow travelers on the journey to the dust. The mystic, the lover, approaches the problem of suffering from a completely different universe of meaning. For him, suffering is not a problem to be solved, it is a gift to be unwrapped. It is the chisel in the hand of the divine sculptor, carving away the excess stone of the ego to reveal the beautiful form of the soul within. He uses the metaphor of the chickpea in the pot. The chickpea boils and cries out to the cook, "Why are you tormenting me?" The cook replies, "I am not tormenting you. I am boiling you to make you delicious, to make you worthy of being served at the king's table." So it is with the human soul. The boiling water of suffering is what makes us tender, what makes us flavorful, what prepares us for union with the divine. Every pain, every heartbreak, every loss is a severe mercy, a disguised grace designed to turn us away from the false pleasures of this world and toward the true and lasting joy of the beloved's presence. From this perspective, a life without suffering would be the greatest of tragedies. It would be a life of spiritual stagnation, a soul left uncooked, unseasoned, and unfit for the divine feast. Where the questioner sees cosmic injustice, the lover sees divine alchemy. Where one finds solace in the shared sorrow of humanity, the other finds joy in the secret purpose of that sorrow. One calls us to huddle together against the storm, the other calls us to dance in the rain, knowing that the storm itself is a blessing sent by the one who loves us beyond all measure. One finds meaning in rebellion, the other finds meaning in surrender. One is the cry of a wounded heart. The other is the song of a heart that is being purposefully and lovingly broken open. The place of reason and the intellect in the quest for truth forms another great chasm between our two poets. For the astronomer, the man of science, reason is the supreme tool, the only reliable guide in a universe of illusion and false promises. His mind is a sharp knife that cuts through the tangled vines of superstition, dogma, and second-hand belief. He trusts the evidence of his senses, the logic of mathematics, and the power of his own critical thinking above all else. He looks at the competing claims of different religions and sees them as human constructs, different attempts to explain the same underlying mystery. A faith that cannot withstand questioning, in his view, is not a faith worth having. The tavern he invites us to is a gymnasium for the mind, a place to strengthen our intellectual muscles, a space where no question is forbidden and where blasphemy is just another word for inquiry. He champions the sincere skeptic over the dogmatic believer, seeing more spiritual potential in the person who is wrestling with difficult questions than in the one who is content with easy answers. His is a call for intellectual integrity, for the courage to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to uncomfortable or unsettling conclusions. It is the path of the intellectual warrior who refuses to outsource his search for meaning and dares to face the cosmos armed only with his own magnificent questioning mind. For the mystic, the lover, reason is not a guide but a guard, a prison warden for the soul. He sees the intellect as a clumsy, limited tool that can only measure the surface of things but can never penetrate the heart of the mystery. He famously wrote, "The intellect is a good servant, but a poor master." He argues that the mind can take you to the door of the beloved's house, but it cannot take you inside. To enter, you must leave your cleverness, your arguments, and your logic on the doorstep. The only key that fits the lock is love. His path is the path of unknowing, of surrendering the rational mind to the intuitive wisdom of the heart. He sees intellectual debate as a foolish game that distracts from the real work, which is the polishing of the heart's mirror. He tells a story of a group of men in a dark room trying to describe an elephant. The one who touches the leg says it is a pillar. The one who touches the ear says it is a fan. The one who touches the trunk says it is a pipe. They are all right in their limited way, but none of them grasps the whole truth. Reason, for him, is like touching one part of the elephant. Only the light of love can illuminate the whole room and reveal the true nature of the beast. Where the astronomer builds a fortress of reason, the mystic builds a bonfire and throws all his books and clever ideas into it. One seeks a truth that can be understood. The other seeks a truth that consumes the one who understands. One sharpens his mind to a razor's edge, the other seeks to dissolve his mind in the ocean of the heart. One is the master of the clear thought. The other is the master of the sacred madness. The perception of time itself becomes a canvas on which these two opposing worldviews paint their masterpieces. The astronomer-poet, the realist, forges his philosophy on the anvil of our mortality. His constant meditation on our eventual return to dust is not intended to be morbid. It is the essential ingredient for a joyful life. He saw that human life is suspended between two great voids, a past that is nothing more than a ghost, and a future that is nothing more than a mirage. The past is a canceled check, the future a promissory note. The only real currency we possess is the infinitesimally small, infinitely precious point of the present moment. This for him was the only paradise, the only reality. The great crime of the religions he saw around him was that they robbed humanity of this single treasure by dangling the promise of a celestial paradise, a future reward for present suffering. He saw this as a cruel and terrible bargain. To sacrifice the tangible joy of a sunset for the abstract promise of a heavenly mansion was a fool's trade. His call to seize the day was a call to radical mindfulness, an urgent plea to awaken from the dream of yesterday and tomorrow, and to arrive fully in the reality of today. Eternity, for him, is not a measure of time but a quality of experience. An eternity of bliss could be found in a single moment of pure, unadulterated presence. His embrace of the now is born from the terrifying realization that time is a predator, that the great celestial clock is ticking, and every tick is a moment of our life turning to dust. The mystic, The lover also speaks of a timeless now, but it comes from a completely different source. It is not born from the fear of death, but from the experience of ecstatic union with the eternal. For him, the ordinary, linear perception of time is an illusion created by the ego, the separate self. The ego lives in time, constantly regretting the past and fearing the future. But when the ego dissolves in the ocean of divine love, time itself disappears. The soul enters a state of being that is timeless, an eternal present. This is not the fleeting present moment of the realist precious because it is about to disappear. It is the eternal, unchanging now of the mystic, the very nature of God. He describes it as the experience of being a child of the moment. It is a state of spontaneous, joyful presence that is not dependent on circumstances. While the realist's now is a refuge from the certainty of future non-existence, the mystic's now is a foretaste of the eternal existence that is our true nature. One finds the eternal in the finite, the other finds the eternal by transcending the finite. One's now is a beautiful, fragile firefly flickering against an endless night. The other's now is the endless night itself, revealed to be not dark and empty, but filled with the light of 1,000 suns. Both paths lead to the present moment, but one arrives there by a courageous acceptance of his own death, while the other arrives by a rapturous experience of his own immortality. The twin pillars of conventional religion, the hope of heaven and the fear of hell, are systematically dismantled by both poets, but they replace them with vastly different structures. The astronomer, with the sharp edge of his reason, performs a radical act of psychological empowerment. He relocates these concepts from a posthumous future to the present state of mind. They are, he suggests, the grand illusions used by the pious to control the populace. Hell is the fire of a life lived in regret, in fear, in longing for what is not. It is the internal torment of a mind that is never at peace, a soul that is constantly at war with itself, always grasping for a future that never arrives or clinging to a past that is gone forever. It is the experience of being absent from your own life. Heaven, conversely, is not a garden of earthly delights waiting in the afterlife. It is the exquisite peace that comes from a moment of pure presence. It is the joy of a mind that has ceased its frantic striving, a heart that is content with what is. It is the feeling of a cool breeze on a hot day, the sound of a beautiful melody, the shared laughter with a friend. Heaven is the texture of a fully lived moment. He takes the keys to the kingdom from the hands of the priests and places them directly into our own. Our salvation or damnation is in our own hands, in every choice we make, in every moment. It is a terrifying and liberating philosophy that places the full responsibility for the quality of our lives squarely on our own shoulders. The mystic also internalizes heaven and hell, but he defines them in the language of love. Hell is not a place of fire, but a state of separation from the beloved. It is the pain of the ego-locked soul that believes itself to be alone and abandoned. It is the torment of the reed flute that has been cut from the reed bed and remembers the sweetness of its origin, a constant burning ache of longing for return. For the mystic, this hell of separation is the default state of most of humanity. Heaven, then, is union. It is the dissolving of that sense of separation. It is the return of the drop to the ocean, the homecoming of the exiled soul. It is not a place of passive pleasure, but a state of ecstatic, dynamic, and creative fusion with the divine. It is the joy of the moth consumed by the flame, the ultimate surrender of the self. While the astronomer's heaven is found in the mindful appreciation of this world, the mystic's heaven is found in the blissful annihilation of the self that perceives this world. One finds heaven by becoming more fully himself, more present in his own unique experience. The other finds heaven by becoming nothing, by losing himself completely in the infinite being of the other. For one, heaven is a state of perfect attention. For the other, it is a state of perfect surrender. Both free us from the fear of a cosmic tyrant, but one makes us the master of our own psychological state, while the other invites us to become the ecstatic slave of a divine love. The human body and the senses are treated with both reverence and suspicion by our two thinkers, who see them as either the only tools we have for experiencing reality, or as a cage that imprisons the soul. For the astronomer-poet, the pragmatist, the senses are everything. His philosophy is a deeply embodied one. He refuses to accept any hypothesis that cannot be verified by his own experience, by what he can see, hear, taste, and touch. His laboratory is the world itself, and his tools are his senses. He chose to trust the tangible data of his own experience, the warmth of the sun, the taste of wine, the logic of numbers, over the intangible promises of the clergy. The body, for him, is not a source of sin to be disciplined and denied. It is the vessel of our consciousness, the only instrument we have for playing the music of life. The pleasures of the body, the joy of a shared meal, the beauty of a lover's lips, are not distractions from the spiritual path. They are the spiritual path. To deny the senses is to deny life itself. He calls us to awaken from our mental abstractions and to return to the vibrant sensory world. To live with dull senses is to be only half alive. His is a gospel of the flesh, a celebration of our earthly existence in all its messy, beautiful, and tangible glory. The mystic's view of the body is far more complex and paradoxical. On one hand, he often describes the body as a cage, a prison for the soul, a dusty overcoat that hides the royal garment of our true spiritual nature. The senses are seen as windows that look out onto the world of illusion, the world of separation, and they distract the soul from looking inward toward the world of unity and truth. He speaks of the need to die before you die, which means to die to the desires and attachments of the physical self in order to be born into the life of the spirit. And yet, this is not a philosophy of pure asceticism. The mystic also sees the body as a sacred instrument, a gateway to the divine. The ecstatic dance of the whirling dervish is a deeply physical practice. It is through the body, through the act of spinning, that the soul is liberated. The senses, too, can be transformed. When the heart is purified, the eyes no longer see a world of separate objects, but a world that is a unified manifestation of the beloved's beauty. The ear no longer hears ordinary sounds, but the secret music of the cosmos. The body, then, is both a prison and a key. It is the source of our illusion of separation, but it is also the vehicle through which we can experience the reality of union. While the astronomer embraces the body for what it is, a finite vessel for experiencing a finite world, the mystic uses the body as a kind of spiritual technology, a tool to be disciplined and then utilized to achieve a state of consciousness that transcends the physical world entirely. Both poets gaze upon the same rose in the garden, yet they see two entirely different universes in its petals. For the astronomer, the man of science and impermanence, the rose is his most beloved teacher of the sacred doctrine of the now. He observes it with a scientist's precision and a poet's heart. He sees its perfect geometry, its vibrant color, its intoxicating scent. But the most important quality of the rose is its impermanence. It blooms for a short time in breathtaking glory, and then it withers, its petals falling to the ground to become dust. For many, this is a source of tragedy. For him, it is the source of the rose's value. Its beauty is so potent precisely because it is so fleeting. If the rose bloomed forever, we would cease to notice it. Its mortality is what makes it precious. It is a silent instructor, teaching us the central lesson of his philosophy: appreciate this moment, for it will not last. He draws a direct parallel between the life of the rose and the life of a human being. We too have our brief season to bloom, to share our beauty with the world, and then we must return to the earth. To spend that short season worrying about what comes next is to miss the entire point of the blooming. The garden becomes his classroom for the soul, a living scripture that teaches the urgency and beauty of a finite existence. The mystic, the man of eternity and love, looks at the same rose and sees not a symbol of impermanence, but a manifestation of the eternal. The rose's beauty is not its own. It is a fleeting glimpse of the eternal, unchanging beauty of the beloved. The rose is a love letter from God, a tiny window through which the splendor of the divine world shines into our own. He tells the story of the nightingale who falls in love with the rose. The nightingale sings its heart out, a song of passionate and painful longing for the rose. But the love is ultimately for the beauty that the rose represents, a beauty that is divine in origin. The rose, for him, is not a lesson in seizing the day, but a reminder of the divine beauty that lies hidden within all of creation. Its purpose is not to make us love this world more, but to make us long for the world from which that beauty originates. Its scent is not just a physical fragrance, it is the fragrance of paradise, designed to awaken in the soul a memory of its true home. While the astronomer sees the rose and is reminded of his own impending death, the mystic sees the rose and is reminded of his own eternal life. One sees a beautiful object, the other sees a divine subject. One looks at the rose and says, "Let us drink wine, for tomorrow we are dust." The other looks at the rose and says, "Let us pray, for we are in the presence of God." The very nature of truth itself is approached from opposite ends of the spectrum of human experience by these two minds. For the astronomer, truth is an objective reality that exists outside of ourselves, and it must be discovered through careful observation, logical deduction, and courageous questioning. His is the scientific method applied to the soul. He trusts in the verifiable, the measurable, the provable. He is a realist who seeks to strip away the veils of illusion, myth, and wishful thinking to see the world as it truly is, in all its cold, hard, and sometimes uncomfortable glory. His truth is a truth of the head. It is a truth that can be articulated, debated, and defended. It is found not in ancient scrolls or priestly pronouncements, but in the elegant and unyielding logic of the cosmos. He would argue that truth is universal and impersonal. The law of gravity does not care if you believe in it. The solar year is a precise measurement, not a matter of opinion. He seeks to align his own understanding with this external, objective truth. The journey to truth for him is an outward one, a process of looking at the world with clear eyes and an honest mind. For the mystic, truth is not an object to be discovered, but a state of being to be experienced. It is not an external reality, but an internal one. Truth is subjective, personal, and ineffable. It cannot be found in books or in logical arguments. It is found in the annihilation of the self, in the direct, unmediated experience of union with the divine. His truth is a truth of the heart. It is a truth that cannot be spoken, only hinted at in poems and stories. It is the truth of the lover who knows the beloved not by reading a description of her, but by being in her presence. He would argue that what we call objective reality is itself a kind of illusion, a shadow play on the wall of the cave. The real truth lies not in the shadows, but in the light that casts them. The journey to truth for him is an inward one, a process of polishing the mirror of the heart until it perfectly reflects the divine light. While the astronomer seeks to understand the world, the mystic seeks to become the world. While one seeks a truth that sets the mind free, the other seeks a truth that sets the soul on fire. One's truth leads to a sober clarity, the other's leads to a sacred madness. One gives you a map of the universe, the other invites you to become the territory itself. Both men stood as rebels against the religious orthodoxy of their time, but their rebellions took on the distinct flavor of their core philosophies. The astronomer's rebellion was intellectual and satirical. He had a deep-seated contempt for hypocrisy, particularly the religious hypocrisy he saw all around him. He observed the men of piety who preached of the glories of the afterlife, yet clung to this world with a desperate greed. He saw men who condemned the simple pleasures of the common folk, yet indulged in the secret pursuit of power and influence. His poems are often biting satires aimed squarely at this religious establishment. He uses humor and irony to expose the absurdity of their positions, questioning the logic of a god who would forbid the very wine that he himself created. The tavern, in this context, becomes a place of authenticity, a space where people are who they are without pretense. He prefers the honest sinner to the dishonest saint. His is a rebellion of the mind, a refusal to bow to an authority that he deems illogical and hypocritical. It is the righteous anger of a man who loves truth and hates falsehood. The mystic's rebellion was of a different order entirely. It was not an intellectual critique of orthodoxy, but a spiritual transcendence of it. He did not argue with the priests, he simply ignored them. His path was the path of direct experience, which made the intermediaries of religion, the priests, the holy books, the rituals unnecessary. He famously wrote, "I am not a Christian, not a Jew, not a Zoroastrian, not a Muslim. My place is the placeless. My trace is the traceless." This is a radical declaration of independence from all religious and cultural identities. His religion was the religion of love, a faith that could not be contained within the walls of any mosque, church, or temple. His rebellion was not against the hypocrisy of the pious, but against the very idea that God could be confined to a single path or a single set of beliefs. He saw the divine as a vast ocean and the different religions as small cups. Why, he asked, would you be content with a cup when you can have the whole ocean? While the astronomer's rebellion leads him to stand outside the mosque and criticize it, the mystic's rebellion leads him to see the entire universe as a mosque. One rebelled in the name of reason. The other rebelled in the name of a love that was so vast and all-encompassing that it made all human divisions and dogmas seem like children's games. The central metaphors for their respective paths to wisdom are the tavern and the dance, and in these two images, the entire conflict of their worldviews is crystallized. The tavern of the astronomer-poet is a sanctuary for the realist. It is a well-lit space where the currency is honest inquiry. It is a place for the courageous individual who has left the well-trodden highway of conformity and is forging their own path. In the tavern, one drinks the wine of direct experience to sharpen the senses and to fortify the soul for the difficult task of facing a silent universe. Conversation is the primary ritual, a shared exploration of the great questions with no expectation of a final answer. The tavern is a space of intellectual camaraderie, a circle of friends who provide a fragile but beautiful shelter against the cold. It is a rebellion against the false certainties of the outside world. It represents a commitment to the tangible, the earthly, the human. It is the sacred space for those who have chosen to find their paradise in this world, for they are convinced there is no other. It is the fortress of the magnificent, lonely, and sober mind. The dance of the mystic is the opposite in every way. It is not a place, but an action. It is not about sharpening the individual mind, but about dissolving it. The dancer spins not in a circle of friends, but alone in a crowd, his goal being to lose his sense of self and merge with the great spinning energy of the cosmos. The dance is not a rational inquiry, it is a physical prayer, a kinetic form of meditation. The goal is not clarity, but ecstatic confusion, the state of being so drunk on the divine that the rational mind ceases to function. The dance is an act of total surrender, an admission that the greatest truths cannot be understood, only embodied. It is a rebellion not against the hypocrisy of the world, but against the tyranny of the ego itself. It represents a commitment to the intangible, the divine, the transcendent. It is the sacred act for those who see this world as a fleeting shadow and yearn for the reality of the world beyond. It is the ecstatic expression of the magnificent, connected, and intoxicated heart. One path leads to a chair in a quiet corner of a tavern, a cup of wine, and a profound conversation. The other leads to the center of a swirling circle, arms outstretched, head tilted back, lost in a silent, dizzying communion with the infinite. The role of the individual self is a battleground where these two philosophies collide with seismic force. The astronomer-poet is a powerful champion of individualism. His entire philosophy is a testament to the power and the necessity of the individual path. He trusted his own mind, his own senses, his own experience above all else. His journey was an inward one, a deep and personal exploration of the universe as he encountered it. He did not look to the crowd for his truth. He looked to the stars, to the wine, to his own heart. His poetry is a permission slip to be different, to think for oneself. He celebrates the outcast, the wanderer, the one who does not fit into the neat boxes of society. The tavern is the gathering place for these individuals, a collection of souls who have had the courage to trust their own journey. This individualism is not a selfish one. It is about cultivating a deep and unwavering sense of inner authority. It is a call to have the courage to be unapologetically, authentically yourself in a world that is always trying to make you into a copy of something else. For the mystic, the individual self, the ego, is the source of all suffering and illusion. It is the primary obstacle to spiritual realization. His entire path is designed to dismantle, to dissolve, to annihilate this sense of a separate self. The ego, he says, is a veil that hides the face of the beloved. The goal is not to cultivate the individual, but to transcend it. The drop of water does not find fulfillment by becoming a more perfect drop, but by falling into the ocean and becoming the ocean. He uses the metaphor of the moth and the flame. The moth is attracted to the light of the candle, but true union comes only when it flies into the flame and is consumed, losing its individual existence. This is the goal of the mystic, to become nothing, to be effaced in the presence of the divine. While the astronomer says, "Trust yourself," the mystic says, "Distrust yourself, the self is a liar and a tyrant." While one teaches you how to be as strong and beautiful, the other teaches you how to dissolve the I completely. One path leads to the heroic affirmation of the individual, the other leads to the ecstatic surrender of the individual. One is a philosophy of self-realization, the other is a philosophy of self-annihilation. The choice between them is a choice between two fundamentally different conceptions of what it means to be human. The experience of loneliness is central to the human condition, and our two poets interpret this primal feeling in ways that are diametrically opposed. For the astronomer, loneliness is an existential fact. We are born alone, we die alone, and in between, we live in a universe that is vast, silent, and indifferent to our fate. But he does not see this as a cause for despair. Instead, he finds a strange and magnificent beauty in this cosmic solitude. It is the loneliness of the mountain peak, the clear, cold air of a reality unclouded by comforting illusions. To accept this loneliness is a mark of spiritual maturity. It is to let go of our childish need for a universe that revolves around us, a God who is preoccupied with our daily dramas. It is in this acceptance that true community becomes possible. The tavern is a gathering of people who have each had the courage to face their own existential loneliness. They come together not to escape their solitude, but to share it. Their connection is all the more precious because it is a freely chosen bond in a meaningless universe, a small fire lit against an infinite darkness. For the mystic, loneliness is not a fact, but an illusion. It is the primary symptom of the disease of the ego. The ego is what creates the sense of separation, the feeling of being a lonely I in a world of others. But this is a grand deception. In reality, we are not separate at all. We are all waves in the same ocean of being, expressions of the same divine consciousness. The beloved is never absent. It is we who are blind to his presence. The mystic's entire path is a cure for this illusion of loneliness. Through practices like the dance, through the constant remembrance of the beloved, the veil of separation is torn and the soul realizes its own intimate and unbreakable connection to all that is. He would say that the astronomer's magnificent loneliness is a noble state, but it is still a state of exile. It is the experience of the reed that has been cut from the reed bed, but has not yet begun its journey home. The ultimate truth is not loneliness, but union. It is not a small fire lit against the darkness, but the realization that the darkness itself is an illusion, and that we are, and always have been, swimming in an ocean of light. One poet teaches us how to be strong enough to bear our loneliness. The other teaches us that we were never truly alone at all. The very concept of freedom is redefined in the crucible of these two worldviews. The astronomer-poet offers a freedom that is intellectual and psychological. It is the freedom from the chains of dogma, the prison of second-hand beliefs. It is the liberty to question everything, to think for oneself, to be the sole author of one's own meaning. This freedom is won through a courageous and often lonely struggle against the forces of conformity and tradition. It is the freedom of the mind that dares to look the void in the face and not blink. This freedom comes with the heavy price of responsibility. If we are free from the dictates of a divine plan, then we are entirely responsible for the content and quality of our own lives. There are no excuses. This is the exhilarating and terrifying freedom of the existential hero who stands alone on a precipice with no map and no guide and chooses his own path. The mystic offers a freedom that is spiritual and paradoxical. It is the freedom that is found not in asserting the will, but in surrendering it. He speaks of becoming a slave of God, which to the modern ear sounds like the opposite of freedom. But for the mystic, the ego, with its endless desires and fears, is the true tyrant. We think we are free, but we are slaves to our ambitions, our appetites, our anxieties. True freedom comes only when we surrender the small, tyrannical will of the ego to the vast, benevolent will of the divine. It is the freedom of the river that does not struggle against its banks, but flows powerfully and gracefully toward the sea. It is the freedom of the pen in the hand of the master scribe, which does not resist, but allows itself to be moved to create a work of beautiful art. This freedom is not won through struggle, but through letting go. It is a release from the burden of choice, the anxiety of responsibility. While the astronomer's freedom is the freedom to be someone, the mystic's freedom is the freedom from being someone. One frees you from the tyranny of the crowd, the other frees you from the tyranny of the self. The final, unavoidable reality of mortality is met with two profoundly different responses. One, a passionate embrace of life, the other, a joyful embrace of death. The astronomer-poet, the ultimate realist, sees death as the final destination, the great equalizer, the undeniable truth that lies beneath all of our striving. We come from dust, and to dust we shall return. He speaks of it without flinching, without the comfort of religious euphemism. But this constant meditation on mortality is not morbid. It is the essential catalyst for a joyful life. It is only by fully confronting the reality of our own annihilation that we can begin to truly live. When you know that your time is short, you stop wasting it. You love more deeply. You savor each moment with an intensity that is impossible for those who believe they have forever. His response to death is a fierce and passionate Hakbuk Diem. He chooses to look the void in the face and, in an act of secret defiance, to fill the small space before it with as much beauty, as much friendship, as much wine, and as much truth as he possibly can. His is a heroism of the finite. For the mystic, death is not the end, but the beginning. It is not an annihilation, but a wedding. He often refers to his own death as his wedding day, the moment of his final and complete union with the beloved. The fear of death, for him, is a product of the ego's mistaken identity. The ego, which thinks it is the body, is terrified of the body's demise. But the soul, which knows it is eternal, sees death as a joyful homecoming, a release from the prison of the physical world. He does not embrace life in spite of death. He embraces death as the culmination of life. The entire spiritual journey is a preparation for this moment of transition. The practice of dying before you die is a way of rehearsing for the final surrender, of letting go of all attachments, so that when the moment comes, the soul can fly freely back to its source. Where the astronomer sees a tragic end, the mystic sees a joyous beginning. Where one sees a return to dust, The other sees a return to God. One teaches us how to live a beautiful, finite life in the face of oblivion. The other teaches us how to live a life of longing and preparation for an eternal union. One's final act is to raise a cup of wine in a toast to a life well lived. The other's final act is to joyfully blow out the candle of his own life, knowing that he is about to merge with the sun. The mystic's entire worldview is perhaps best captured in his most famous metaphor, the reed flute. The soul, he says, is like a reed that has been cut from a vast reed bed, which represents the world of divine unity. A master craftsman, God, has hollowed it out, emptying it of itself, and has poked holes in it, which represent the wounds and sufferings of life. The flute, in its separation, sings a song of longing, a haunting melody of yearning for its origin. The breath that passes through it, creating the music, is the divine spirit. We are all, he suggests, reed fruits. Our deepest, most authentic self is not the reed itself, but the song of longing that it sings, a song that is not ours, but God's. Our pain, our love, our poetry, our very lives are but the breath of the beloved singing a song of separation and a promise of return. How would the astronomer-poet, the clear-eyed realist, interpret this beautiful and haunting image? He would likely appreciate the poetry of it, but he would deconstruct the metaphysics. He might see the reed flute not as a symbol of the soul's exile, but as a perfect metaphor for the human condition in a godless universe. We are indeed reeds, cut from our origins in the earth, hollowed out by the random chances of life. We are empty vessels. And the music that we make is not the breath of a divine spirit, but the sound of the indifferent wind of existence blowing through us. The song is beautiful, yes, but it is our beauty, a fragile and temporary music that we create ourselves in the face of an eternal silence. The song is not one of longing for a divine home, but a song of our own fleeting joys and sorrows, a testament to our brief and beautiful existence. For the mystic, the song is proof of God's presence. For the realist, the song is proof of our own remarkable and unasked-for creativity. One hears a call to return, the other hears a call to be more fully here. The purpose of poetry itself reveals the chasm between their two souls. For the astronomer, poetry is a vessel for philosophy, a vehicle for truth. It is the most precise and beautiful language he can find to articulate his rational conclusions about the nature of existence. Each verse is a carefully crafted argument, a logical proposition dressed in the beautiful robes of metaphor. He uses poetry to challenge, to question, to persuade. His goal is to awaken the reader's mind, to lead them to a state of sober, clear-eyed realism. His poetry is the work of a master craftsman, a jeweler who cuts and polishes each word to perfectly reflect the light of reason. It is a means to an end, and that end is philosophical clarity. For the mystic, poetry is not a vehicle for truth, it is a symptom of it. It is not an act of creation, but an act of transcription. He often described himself not as a poet, but as a channel. His poems were not the product of careful thought and craft, but the involuntary overflow of a heart that was so intoxicated with divine love that it could not help but sing. He was, by his own account, a silent man until he met his spiritual master who set his soul on fire. The poetry came after, an uncontrollable torrent of words that poured out of him as he danced, as he walked, as he talked. It was not his poetry, it was the beloved's poetry, speaking through him. His goal is not to awaken the mind, but to bypass it, to intoxicate the heart, to transmit a state of being rather than a set of ideas. His poetry is not a map to the destination, it is a taste of the destination itself. While one uses poetry to describe the world, the other uses poetry to create a world. One is the poetry of a brilliant mind, the other is the poetry of a burning heart. Both poets speak of a kind of drunkenness, a sacred intoxication, but they are connoisseurs of profoundly different vintages. The astronomer-poet's is a sober drunkenness. It is the intoxication of the realist who has had the courage to drink the wine of unmediated experience and to see the world as it is. This is a drunkenness that leads not to confusion, but to a fierce and sometimes painful clarity. It is the state of being so utterly consumed by the present moment that the anxieties of the past and future are dissolved. It is a conscious choice to become inebriated on the beauty and the sorrow of this life, because this life is all there is. It is a sober intoxication because it is rooted in a deep understanding of our finite and fragile reality. It is the joy of the man who is about to be executed, but who takes the time to savor his last meal, not to forget his fate, but to fully inhabit the moments before it. It is a drunkenness that sharpens the mind and fortifies the will. The mystic's is an ecstatic drunkenness. It is the intoxication of the lover who has drunk the wine of divine love and has lost his sober, rational mind. This is a drunkenness that leads not to clarity, but to a sacred madness, a blissful confusion in which the boundaries of the self dissolve. The goal is to become so drunk on God that one forgets oneself completely. It is not an embrace of this world, but an escape from it, a flight into the arms of the beloved. This intoxication is not a choice, but a state of being that overtakes the soul. It is the involuntary rapture of the heart that has been touched by the divine. It is the drunkenness of the moth as it is consumed by the flame, a state of blissful annihilation. While the astronomer drinks to become more fully himself, the mystic drinks to become nothing. One drunkenness leads to a tavern at the edge of the universe. The other leads to a dance at the center of existence. One is the clear-eyed celebration of the beautiful prison of our existence. The other is the ecstatic escape from that prison into an infinite freedom. And yet, are these two titans truly such perfect opposites? Or are they two faces of the same coin, two poles of the same human soul? If we look closely, we can find a common ground, a shared foundation upon which their magnificent and conflicting castles are built. Both men were rebels who stood against the deadening hand of blind dogma. Both championed the authority of direct, personal experience over the second-hand truths of tradition. For the astronomer, that experience was sensory and intellectual. For the mystic, it was intuitive and emotional. But for both, the truth was something to be lived, not merely believed. Both had a deep contempt for hypocrisy and a profound love for authenticity. Both understood the power of metaphor and poetry to express truths that lie beyond the reach of ordinary prose. And both, in their own way, were masters of the art of perception, teaching us to look at the world with fresh eyes, to see the miraculous in the mundane. The astronomer found the sacred in a cup of wine and a loaf of bread shared with a friend. The mystic found it in the spinning of his own body and the longing of his own heart. Both were calling for a religion of the here and now, a faith rooted not in promises of a distant future, but in the vibrant reality of the present moment. Perhaps they are not two different paths, but two essential movements in the same dance, the yin and the yang of the spiritual life. Perhaps the soul needs both the clear-eyed doubt of the questioner and the ecstatic faith of the lover. The journey outward to understand the cosmos and the journey inward to experience it. Can the realist also be a lover? Can the questioner's heart be moved by a profound and passionate love? Of course it can. The astronomer-poet's work, for all its intellectual rigor, is not a cold philosophy. It is filled with a deep and poignant love for the world. It is the love of a man who knows that everything he loves is destined to disappear. This knowledge does not diminish his love, it intensifies it. It is a love sharpened by the certainty of loss. He loves the rose more because he knows it will wither. He loves his friend more because he knows they will one day be dust. He loves this life more because he knows it is a brief and unrepeatable miracle. This is a tragic love, a love tinged with the melancholy of impermanence, but it is a powerful and authentic love nonetheless. It is a love that does not ask for eternity. It does not demand a happily ever after. It is a love that is content with the beauty of a single, fleeting moment. It is the love of a parent watching their child sleep, a moment of perfect, heartbreaking beauty that is already becoming a memory. The question is, love is a deeply human love, a love that finds its meaning not in a divine promise, but in the fragile and precious connection between two finite beings in a vast and silent universe. It is a love that says, "We are all we have, and so let us be kind." It is a love that is all the more beautiful for being a small, defiant flame in an overwhelming darkness. And can the lover also be a doubter? Can the mystic, in his ecstatic certainty, also experience the dark night of the soul? Absolutely. The mystic's path is not one of uninterrupted bliss. His poetry is filled with accounts of the pain of separation, the agony of feeling abandoned by the beloved. This is a form of doubt, a spiritual doubt that is perhaps more painful than any intellectual skepticism. It is the doubt of the lover who fears he has been rejected. This doubt is not a sign of a lack of faith, it is an essential part of the journey. It is the winter that must precede the spring. It is the emptying of the cup so that it can be filled again. The mystic's doubt is not a questioning of God's existence, but a questioning of his own worthiness, his own connection. It is the dark, lonely night of the soul where all sense of the beloved's presence disappears and the lover is left alone with his own desperate yearning. But it is in this very darkness, he suggests, that the faith is forged. It is easy to love God when one feels his presence. The true test is to love him when one feels his absence. The lover's doubt is what fuels his longing, what drives him to dance with more fervor, to pray with more desperation, to polish the mirror of his heart with more diligence. It is the grit in the oyster that creates the pearl. While the questioner's doubt is a tool of the mind, the lover's doubt is a trial of the heart. One leads to intellectual clarity, the other leads to a deeper, more resilient, and more compassionate faith. Both rebellions, that of the mind and that of the heart, have left an indelible mark on the landscape of the human spirit. The astronomer's legacy is a powerful permission slip for the honest skeptic. He stands as the patron saint of all those who cannot and will not believe without evidence. He gives a voice to the magnificent loneliness of the rational mind in a universe that does not seem to be rational. He teaches us that it is possible to live a life of joy, meaning, and integrity without the comfort of religious faith. His is a rebellion that empowers the individual, that champions the authority of one's own experience, and that finds a strange and beautiful grace in the acceptance of our own finitude. The mystic's legacy is a testament to the explosive power of the human heart. He stands as a witness to the reality of a transcendent love that dissolves all boundaries and consumes all fear. He gives a voice to the ecstatic yearning of the soul for its source. He teaches us that the universe is not a cold, empty void, but a living, breathing, and loving presence. His is a rebellion that annihilates the individual ego, that champions the authority of intuitive knowing, and that finds the ultimate freedom in the act of complete and total surrender. One built a tavern as a refuge from the world. The other turned the world into a dance floor. One offers the cool, clear water of reason. The other offers the intoxicating, fiery wine of love. One is the rebellion of the brave mind. The other is the rebellion of the burning heart. The history of human thought is a history of the conflict and the conversation between these two eternal poles. The world is a ruin, a place of constant decay and dissolution. The astronomer-poet looks at the ancient ruins of empires, once mighty and proud, and sees the final, irrefutable evidence for the futility of human ambition. He sees that all our striving, our building, our conquering is destined to become nothing but mounds of earth. This meditation on ruin leads him to a philosophy of pragmatism and humility. Since all is transient, let us focus on the small, simple, and real pleasures of the now, a cup of wine, a book of verse, a friend to share them with. The ruin teaches him to devalue power, wealth, and fame, and to value the fleeting beauty of the present moment. It is a lesson in letting go of the grand illusions of the ego and embracing the simple truth of our impermanence. The mystic looks upon the very same ruin and sees something entirely different. He has a famous saying, "The treasure is in the ruin." He tells stories of people who are told in a dream to go to a distant city to find a treasure buried under a certain bridge. When they get there, they find nothing. Dejected, they tell their story to a wise man, who laughs and says, "I had a dream that the treasure was buried in your own backyard, under your own house." The traveler returns home, digs in his own ruined backyard, and finds the treasure. The ruin, for the mystic, is the human heart, broken by suffering and longing. It is the ego, shattered by the trials of life. It is in this very place of brokenness, of ruin, that the divine treasure is hidden. God does not dwell in the palaces of the proud and the whole, but in the ruins of the humble and the heartbroken. The ruin, for him, is not a symbol of the futility of life, but a map to the secret location of divine grace. One sees the ruin and is counseled to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of this world. The other sees the ruin and is counseled to dig deeper for the eternal treasures of the next. One finds a lesson in the dust, the other finds a treasure beneath it. And so the choice is placed before you, the fellow traveler, the seeker. Two paths diverge in the desert of the human soul. Which one will you take? Do you walk the path of the questioner? A path of intellectual honesty, of clear-eyed courage, a path that requires you to stand alone in a silent universe and create your own meaning. It is a path that offers the deep satisfaction of the authentic individual, the sober joy of the realist who loves the world as it is, not as he wishes it to be. It is a path of the mind, a path that leads to a profound and compassionate humanism. Or do you walk the path of the lover? A path of ecstatic surrender, of radical faith, a path that requires you to lose yourself in a divine mystery that can never be understood. It is a path that offers the blissful joy of union, the intoxicating certainty of the mystic who sees the face of the beloved everywhere. It is a path of the heart, a path that leads to a transcendent and all-encompassing spirituality. Are these two paths mutually exclusive? Must the mind be silent for the heart to sing? Must the heart be still for the mind to see clearly? This is the eternal question that these two Persian masters leave with us. Perhaps the ultimate wisdom lies not in choosing one path over the other, but in learning to walk on the razor's edge between them, to hold the tension of these two opposing truths within a single human heart, to have the courage to question everything and the humility to surrender to what is beyond questioning. Imagine for a moment a meeting between these two souls in some timeless, placeless tavern. The astronomer-poet sits in a quiet corner, a cup of wine in his hand, his eyes filled with a clear, melancholy wisdom. The mystic enters, not walking but spinning, his eyes closed, a beatific smile on his face. He comes to a rest before the astronomer's table. The astronomer gestures to a chair. "Sit," he says. "The journey is long, and the road is dusty." The mystic smiles. "But the dust itself is dancing," he replies. "Can't you see it?" The astronomer takes a slow sip of his wine. "I see the dust," he says. "I have measured its particles and calculated its inevitable victory. It is the final answer to all our questions." The mystic's eyes open, and they are not filled with madness, but with a profound and loving compassion. "Ah," he says softly, "but you are asking the wrong questions. You ask why, and the universe is silent. Ask who, and the universe answers with your own heartbeat." The astronomer looks out the tavern window at the cold, distant stars. "I have listened to my heartbeat," he says. "It is the frantic and temporary ticking of a clock that is running down." The mystic places his hand on his own heart. "Listen again," he whispers. "It is not the ticking of a clock. It is the drumming of the beloved, calling you to the dance." They sit for a long moment in a shared and resonant silence. The questioner and the lover, the realist and the dreamer, the mind and the heart. The tavern is filled with the silent music of their two opposing and equally beautiful truths. The universe contains them both. The human heart contains them both. The final truth is not a proposition, but a paradox. The great battle between these two worldviews does not end with a victor. It does not resolve into a neat and tidy conclusion. Instead, it leaves us suspended in the vibrant, dynamic, and ultimately sacred space of the unanswered question. To be fully human is to live in this tension. It is to have a mind that is sharp enough to see the cold, hard facts of our existence, our finitude, our cosmic insignificance, the silence of the heavens, and to have a heart that is vast enough to fall in love with the mystery anyway. It is to be both the astronomer, measuring the shadows, and the mystic, dancing with the light. The journey does not end with an arrival at a final destination. It ends with the realization that the journey itself is the destination. The path is the goal. The questioning is the answer. The longing is the fulfillment. The choice is not between the tavern and the dance. The choice is to build a tavern where the dancers are welcome, to start a dance where the questioners are honored. It is to learn how to hold a cup of wine steady in one hand while the other is outstretched to the heavens, to have your feet firmly planted on the earth while your soul is spinning with the stars. The final legacy of these two great poets is not a set of beliefs, but an invitation. It is an invitation to live a larger, more courageous, and more authentic life. It is a call to awaken from the slumber of second-hand truths and to begin the difficult and beautiful work of forging your own path, of creating your own unique synthesis of the head and the heart. The final word is not a word at all. It is silence. It is the profound and resonant silence that follows a beautiful piece of music. It is the silence of the astronomer-poet who has asked his last question and is now content to simply watch the silent turning of the stars. It is the silence of the mystic who has sung his last song of longing and has now dissolved into the silent embrace of the beloved. It is the silence that contains both the question and the answer, the doubt and the faith, the sorrow and the joy. It is the silence from which all poetry is born and to which all life returns. The tavern door is open. The dance has begun. The wine is poured. The eternal question and the eternal answer are waiting. Which will you embrace?